Alright guys, HyDra again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Today may very well go down as one of the most important days in the history of competitive Call of Duty. We've been begging for a W from the CDL now for quite some time, desperately needing one, and it seems finally that has arrived today. A major overhaul to the structure of the league, effectively eliminating the franchise ecosystem as we know it. Massive changes to sustainability of the esports going forwards, the structure of the events themselves, and the possibility of expansion in the very near future. Loads to dive into today. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. We have plenty to get into. There was a big change as well to the game today. The Codcaster scoreboard was believed to have been fixed, but yeah, that ain't the case. However, there are, thankfully, some positive news elsewhere to dive into. This is obviously related in some regard to the Hex Scump lawsuit. It may not be directly related, but it's clearly related in the sense of there have been frustrations behind the scenes with the way that the COD League has been run. We emphasised these problems since day one of the league, and honestly day zero. Like, as soon as it was confirmed we were going to this franchise league back on, I don't know, February the 13th or something, 2019, something like that, it became rather clear this wasn't a good idea for many of us that have been around the scene for some time. Those problems have borne fruit over the last several years, and here we are in the 5th year of the league, and it's arguably in some ways the worst it has ever been. Just the other day, the Carolina Royal Ravens event was cancelled, and it's going to move to a no-fan environment, and it has been L after L after L. Hex and Scump have brought a mega lawsuit against the league. The current update on this is that it's going to arbitration. We don't really know if that's had anything to do with the announcement that we see today, but we did hear rumours a few weeks ago now that there was something brewing to this effect. And I'm not going to lie, guys, if you told me the CDL was doing an announcement today and they were going to do agreements to create a stronger, more sustainable league, I would have maybe guessed that one or two of the things we're about to discuss would have been in the agreement. The fact that all of these have been approved and agreed to by Activision is just such a great day, honestly, for the future of the COD League and just the way that it's going to be structured going forwards and what we want to see, I think, from this esport in general. If I had to make a list of things that I would have done, this was basically the list. So Daniel say, look, we don't really know what these guys do most of the time, but they have been working, no doubt, on this team agreement for a while, and this is what they have to say on the matter. So we'll start from the top. Been some time since the last community update. Over the past 5 seasons, the COD League and its teams have learned a great deal about the evolving business model of esports and its challenges. You know, you could argue that some of us saw this coming, but whatever. Let's give them their day. We have taken these learnings and together with our CDL teams, made changes to create a stronger, more sustainable league. In the past, the league implemented various solutions to alleviate some of the challenges for teams. Financial relief was a big one during the whole pandemic situation, pausing franchise fee payments, we'll get back to that, providing funding for team-hosted events, but maybe not as much as they could have done, guaranteeing revenue to teams, and creating in-game team bundles. While the COD League's popularity continues to grow, evident by this past season where we saw the highest viewership in history and record-breaking attendance, I certainly think this feels true. Like, for the live events, they seem to be growing and doing a phenomenal job. Unfortunately, we don't have as many of them as we should have. In terms of viewership, sure, maybe that was somewhat helped by Twitch and the Scump Watch Party and these other factors. There's more we can certainly do, I think, to grow the space, but we should be capitalizing on the growth that we have seen. Not going back to YouTube as one example. For the better part of a year, we've been working with the team owners on a new approach that sets us up for mutual success. Today, I'm excited to share details of our updated team structure to help secure the longevity of competitive Call of Duty. So this has been a big question that I've had. What happens after the CDL? It's quite clear that the current business model doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. These teams are paid $27.5 million, $25 million, whatever the number is, to get into a league, and they don't get what they believe they were to be promised, and Activision has failed to deliver on many of those promises. This is part of the reason why Hex and Scump did this massive lawsuit, and part of the reason why they have made major changes now to the structure. My concern was, given this was like Bobby Kotick and Activision's pet project, because they could get all their billionaire friends in to give a load of money over, and therefore make a lot of money as a result, as they most certainly did, was like, well, they won't necessarily be willing to forego some of that money, at least that's what I believe to be the case, and the future of competitive COD esports was a question, because if the CDL fails and dies, and it's clearly on a downward trajectory if you watched over the last couple of years, what's next? Do they go back to the CWL? Do they just outsource everything and say, right, screw you guys, you messed it up, we're gonna, crack on with an entirely different ecosystem, maybe we'll pay some money for the World Championship, but basically we're gonna go back to the real grassroots days where, lots of the prize pools go back to basically zero, and the support that was shown, possibly support that was shown in the wrong way and for the wrong reasons, then gets rescinded. And I was concerned, like, what does this mean for the future of competitive COD? What does COD look like in 2-3 years' time? But it seems to me that the Call of Duty League as a branding will continue to exist. What actually happens underneath that league structure seems now remarkably different to how it did earlier today. So firstly, outstanding entry fees will be eliminated, but this is the big part to me, and any fees previously collected from teams will be returned in full. So they paused the collection of these a couple of years ago, but the belief was that maybe the deadline to start collecting those fees again was coming very shortly. So let's say 27.5 million to enter the league. Not only will any money paid be returned, but anything that's left doesn't have to be paid. So the whole idea of a franchise model is effectively out the window, right? Because these teams have paid in to get their spots. Now, anything they paid goes back to the teams. So the idea of a franchise model is dead, right? Under this idea, now we will still have the 12 teams. Of course, it massively opens the question to, what about expansion? Is there still some sort of fee to get in? Is it going to become more of like a partnership structure, like in Valorant, where Riot doesn't actually, they pay their partners to come in, but they choose who they bring in. So is there still some entry fee to enter that new teams may have to pay, or how does it work? Because immediately as soon as this happens, there has been announcements from other organizations that, yeah, we're interested in getting in, as long as we don't have to pay a stupid amount of money to do so, which teams did in the first place. Also raises the question to me, at some point, will the city-based thing disappear? Because if franchising and, you know, you paying for the spot and owning a spot in the league effectively no longer exists because the money has been returned, then does it make sense to be city-based anymore? That, I feel, is potentially the next piece to go. Some organizations, maybe Minnesota, probably Toronto, would like to keep that in their name, and I feel like there shouldn't be a problem to do so. But if OpTic Texas want to go back to OpTic Gaming, I think they should be allowed to do so, and I feel like that will happen as maybe a next step here. But there's other things as well. If it was just that, I'd have said, wow, fantastic, what a day. But no, there's even more. So not only will they have that, but also increased revenue tied to the sale of their in-game merchandise. This is a big thing, like the organizations have told the league, look guys, Activision Blizzard and now Microsoft effectively, you're making all the money. You make all the money from the game. You make all the money from us running this league. If there's anyone benefiting from the state of the COD League, it's Activision Blizzard. And that's the reality of when the publisher is also the one running the league. This has been a big problem in terms of the sustainability of the sport, and many of these teams just hemorrhaging so much money. So this idea that selling the team bundles and the champs bundles, a higher percentage of that is going to go to the teams. I'd also kind of like to see how about a percentage of what you actually sell goes to you. I don't know if that's involved in this, but I think it should be, because that definitely inspires the teams to try and promote their own stuff, because then they're going to get a cut of it, as we've seen in Valorant with, you know, the Sentinels bundle has been doing a fair few rounds on Twitch, if you guys haven't seen that going around. The next absolute banger, and this actually might be my favorite one, is increasing the subsidy amounts for teams organizing live in-person events. It's quite clear that there are teams that want to run events, but they just don't see how it can be financially sustainable. Only Boston, Toronto, and probably OpTic have actually figured out a way to break even running these events. But the CDL is now saying, you know what? We know that hosting these large-scale events is vital to teams and to the community, and man, I wish we had more of them. This year we have 5, and one of them's not going to have fans. Back in Advanced Warfare, we had 14, just to put it into context. So they say they'll be increasing the subsidies. So this means that teams, I don't know what happened with the whole Carolina thing, but there will be teams out there now that will say, great, you guys are giving us more money to host an event so we can break even or even make some money doing so. Fantastic. We'll run an event, we'll run a major, we'll run an open, and potentially even somebody could, you know, host the World Championship or something. But the fact that they mention opens as well, you know, opens, you know, okay, challenger stuff, but does that mean Pro-Am potentially? Does that mean a more open circuit style format that we used to have? Something to look at. And also a 2-year minimum revenue guarantee so the teams can be, you know, much more sustainable in their operations in the longer term. So I don't think it was really possible to get a better announcement today in terms of the future of the league, because it means the league is still here, right? Like, the whole concept of COD Esports is not disappearing. It's quite clear that Microsoft and Activision Blizzard, whatever remains of that team, are clearly committed to the future of the ecosystem and committed to the future of what is an absolutely fantastic community as far as I'm concerned. And I didn't want to see the league die because that just raised questions as to what was going to come next. The much better outcome is the league remains as the league, but just whatever happens under the heading is massively restructured, and that is what we are currently seeing. More majors is probably going to be a consequence of this. Next year's game is a tryout game. I mean, come on, how good does it get? Now, there are some potential risks involved, of course, because, you know, the Overwatch League, for example, they did something in some ways kind of similar, but I think that there was a feeling that the Overwatch League wasn't trending in the same way the COD League is, nor has quite the monetization potential that Call of Duty has, and I think that's kind of what they're saying here, like the COD League's popularity continues to grow, so we've got to capitalize on the business side, and the Overwatch League is a little bit different, but even then, they've restructured that to something in some ways kind of similar, but they probably shut down their league, and now they're doing something else which is more open circuit, but there isn't as much, you know, as many events going on. It feels to me that the interest in COD and the way they're approaching this is rather different and probably rather better. So at the same time, Toronto Ultra or Overactive Media, the ownership, they do their own press release and they say the following. That's one to look at in a second. But the key components include the elimination of all Overactive Media entry fees, totaling $25.5 million US. Now that doesn't mean they're getting that back. That means they get back whatever they paid in and whatever was owed. So that's effectively been forgiven. They'll also get a one-time restructuring payment of $2 million US in the second quarter. So that's very interesting indeed. I don't know if that's part of like the new guaranteed revenue side or whether that's just, you know, a subsidy that the organizations are getting from the league, because as I say, that's how it now works in Valorant, where Riot give a stipend to the teams in favor of them being effectively partners in the league, but then Riot choose the partners, and that might be a world we're moving into. But just listen to this. Enhanced revenue streams for Call of Duty League teams, including direct team participation for digital in-game merchandise and opportunities for licensed third-party tournaments. So, you know, we've talked about this before, the future of what it might look like with ESL, for example, or the ESL FaZe group, or Gfinity, or various other tournament organizers that still exist to run COD League events, or, you know, their own events. We've thought about what is the possibility of the league themselves saying, okay, we're not going to be the ones to run the events anymore, we're going to outsource that a little bit, ESL FaZe group can run them effectively, Esports Engine, right, is what that would look like. They can run the events, and maybe other elements can come through as well. I mean, back in the day, we had Gfinities, we had UMGs, we had MLGs, you know, we had all sorts of tournament organizers, and that created for a fantastic ecosystem, I thought, even though it was very much the early days. We may have something similar on the horizon, the fact that Ultra are directly implying that there will be licensed third-party tournaments, possibly in the off-season that happen, but also possibly during the regular season. So understandably, lots of positive reaction to this, and sure, we're yet to see what this means. The fact that the teams now have more money means that, well, what can they do with this extra money? Doesn't mean they're going to be just saving it up, putting it in the bank, but also you've got to understand, most of these teams were massively loss-making, so the fact that they now have extra money doesn't necessarily mean they're just going to be pocketing it and doing the same thing they've been doing and continuing not to spend and invest and, you know, try and actually create something for the community. It's more likely to me, you know, they're actually going to be in a position to do more of that, obviously, with all of these franchise payments and so be it freed up. And also, if we do go into like a partnership type model, the teams that aren't particularly interested in committing and maybe just want to get out of here, they can feel free to do that, because there are absolutely other organizations around esports that are interested in getting into the Call of Duty League. Certainly now they don't have to pay to get in, or if they do have to pay, it's very minimal compared to the massive franchise fee that was previously the case, because that's the whole thing with the franchising, is that expansion was never going to happen because they could not, in any good faith, sell a franchise for more money than they initially did. Let's say the initial was $25 million. If you're going to do expansion, those guys have to pay 28, 30 million, so you can show the current investors that their investment has actually appreciated in value. If you can't do that, which clearly you can't at the moment, then you can't do expansion, it ain't going to work. As Kismet says, finally some good news regarding the league. Happy to see them buy into these organizations to keep them afloat. Without both parties, it just crashes, because that's the point, right, that these teams were arguably in dire straits behind the scenes, and hopefully we get a far more competitive and sustainable ecosystem as a result of this. You know, and even that from Kismet on the final part, go buy the Subliners skin, because now there's a cool incentive for these teams to do so, because I think they will get a percentage of that money to themselves, and it just creates a much better environment. I think they are taking good lessons on board from what we see elsewhere in esports, and honestly, what happened pre the Call of Duty League even existing. And then, of course, it raises the question, what happens next in terms of expansion? Is that actually a possibility in the very near future? As I said, also, I wonder what happens with the geolocation, whether that starts to fade away. To me, this is the first step of effectively a return to what we had pre-CDL, but it'll still be called the CDL, and the organizations that are currently involved will remain involved, but maybe other organizations come through as well. So the full implications of this are yet to be fully seen. There may be some negatives, but I feel like in general, there's no doubt this is a positive news, and just showing that, you know, Microsoft, it seems, is still committed to making this work. You know, they've got plenty of money to throw around, and there's clearly a lot of interest from organizations and a massive and fantastic community behind it as well that we can absolutely make work. And it's good to see that finally we have some positive news to talk about. So as Ben says, what about expansion? Could it happen this off-season, right? We've always talked about it every year. It's like, well, is expansion going to happen? We talked about it after year 1, after year 2, after year 3, and then people were like, yeah, it ain't ever happening, is it? Like, let's just give up on the intention. I'd like to see 16 teams, absolutely. Of course, there is a question, if you had 16 teams, how competitive would it be? You know, more teams to just get slammed every week. But then again, given that some of these organizations have had their franchise payments, well, all of them have had their franchise payments kind of forgiven, and that they're now getting money back, they're getting guaranteed revenue, does that not open the door to teams like Thieves and to G2 with the Minnesota Rocker and to other franchises to say, okay, you know what, we do have some money to play with. We ain't just going to sit here and, like Thieves had to do, drop the salaries a lot, field a bit of a restructuring, rebuilding team. Can they come in, you know, the business end? They can start offering big salaries, maybe make the league more competitive from top to bottom, as we've definitely seen a consolidation over the last couple of years in terms of talent, because teams like Thieves have had to take a step back in what they can offer. And there was so much talk about this, even FaZe came along, of course, like OG, Caster for COD, and then was involved on the YouTube gaming side. I'm pretty sure did the deal probably with the CDL on the YouTube stuff a couple of years ago. And yeah, maybe I need to own a COD team now. We've had lots of talk about this, even from Unit here. So Unit Sean, who is the co-owner and CEO of Space Station Gaming, an organization that's had a very good rep lately, certainly in the Halo side, and he makes it very clear, if COD League were to expand, we would be interested in coming in. We believe that TSM are interested. That was rumored. I think we talked about it on the Dope Jig episode maybe 2-3 weeks ago, that TSM are absolutely interested in coming into the sport. And as he says actually in the replies, like, we really wouldn't want to do the whole, oh, we've got to locate in a city thing, because that was just pointless in the first place. Like, if there is going to be expansion, I'm almost certain those teams will be allowed to just be those teams. I don't think TSM want to come in and have to, like, choose a city. Like, that's a relic of the way things were being orchestrated back in 2019. And I think we've learned over the last few years that doesn't make any sense. So if you are to attract organizations that can be themselves, then surely that opens the door to LA Thieves, just to be 100 Thieves. Again, OpTic Texas to be OpTic Gaming. Seattle Surge can become Luminosity again if they want to. And all of a sudden, we are getting closer, step by step, to a pre-CDL environment with the arguably increased and better organization support that we have today with the big backers of these franchise teams, some of which are actually still committed to doing a great job here in the space, if the entire ecosystem is actually makes sense and is sustainable. So I think that's pretty much the update we have for today. Quite a big one. Hopefully I explained things reasonably well. I'm sure there's going to be further developments here over the coming days, but massively intrigued to your thoughts, of course, in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.